side. Mm.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's your girl, Gabrielle. Welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. Okay. Welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. It's your girl, Gabrielle, just testing out some things here. All right. So, welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. This is the show where we like to have real talk about real things. Um, I'm actually going to give. I'm going to read the. Um, I'm going to read the description of my show that courtesy of artificial intelligence. So let me just explain to you what the show is about. So I'm just going to read this here. I think it's pretty cool. All right. So experience the captivating world of the Hot Topics podcast, brought to you by us, A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. Join us as we delve into thought provoking discussions on the ever evolving realms of education, employment, physical health, mental health, and a host of other fascinating subjects. Guided by the insightful host, Gabrielle Crichlow, that'd be me, which is the owner and director of A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. Each episode takes on an interview style format featuring guests from diverse backgrounds who bring their unique perspectives to illuminate these topics. At Hot Topics, our mission is to cultivate a culture of learning and self improvement. We steer clear of purposeless gossip and instead prioritize meaningful conversations that inspire a dedicated audience of watchers and listeners. Prepare to embark on a transformative journey of personal and collective growth as we explore crucial issues together. Tune in to Hot Topics and be a part of the conversation. So, thank you, artificial intelligence, for that. So that pretty much sums up what the show is all about. So today, let me tell you what the topic is for today. So the topic today is, what is dysgraphia? So this is something that kind of came up for me maybe in the past few months, and in terms of the students that I tutored, and this is something that came up, so I wanted to know what it was about, and I happen to have a guest who is going to explain that. And the beautiful thing is, she is actually a returning guest. So she was on my show before, and she has now returned to the show. And that guest is Lisa Parnello. So she was on before talking about what is dyslexia. Now she's going to talk about what is dysgraphia. So Lisa Parnello is my returning guest, and let me just briefly remind you about who she is. So Lisa Parnello is a dyslexia therapist, and she has a podcast called Dyslexia Devoted. Both of them help children and parents on their dyslexia journey. So, simply put, beautiful. All right. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Lisa to the stage. Hey,
Hi, I'm so
hey.
glad to be back with you again today.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back on Hot Topics. So, before you talked about dyslexia,
hmm
so now you're here to talk about dysgraphia. So, it's something that kind of popped up for me in my tutoring, like I said. So I kind of wanted to shine a light on this. So I'm going to pass the baton to you now. So please tell us, what is dysgraphia?
It is such a great question you're asking, and it is something that so many people don't know even exist. We have so many people who know about autism or dyslexia and things like that, but dysgraphia is one that is even lesser known. And a lot of confusion actually comes up with dysgraphia because it can be kind of interchangeably used with another learning difference. So, dysgraphia is a learning difference in which the child or grown up, because it's one of those things that can span all ages, of course, has trouble with the physical act of writing. And so when a child with dysgraphia goes to write something, oftentimes what you see on the paper doesn't match what you see when you actually talk to the child. So when you talk to them, they seem really smart, they know what they're doing, they can read books, and they have really great vocabularies. And then you see they're writing on a piece of paper and it looks like a kindergartner did it, even if they're in fourth or fifth or sixth grade. So dysgraphia makes it really challenging for kids to write on a line. And so their letters might be floating up in the air or going really crooked, or the sizes might be all different shapes and sizes. So you might have really big P's and really tiny A's, and they might have letters that are all squished together and you can't tell where one word ends and the next one begins. And it's really challenging to read their writing. And if you look just at their writing, it looks like they don't really know much. But if you look really carefully, you can tell there's actually some really amazing thoughts in there a lot of times because they have really great ideas. It just doesn't make it to the page. And dysgraphia often gets confused with a disorder of written expression. And a lot of times people think they're kind of interchangeable, but really the written expression one is the kids don't know what to write. They don't know how to get their ideas on paper. So when we think about a kid with dysgraphia, they have really great ideas and they know what to write, but it just looks like gook when they put it on a piece of paper. And it's really hard to read their writing. And then they get really frustrated when you ask them, like, hey, tell me what your story says. And they're like, just read it. And they don't understand that you can't read their writing. And it's really challenging. And kids with a disorder of written expression a lot of times have trouble even writing their ideas down. And so they get a little bit mixed up. But either way, it means the child is really having a hard time communicating through any form of written ideas.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you for that. So I guess my question is, like, how do you know it's not as simple that maybe they just have bad handwriting, or so how do you know it's not just like poor handwriting as opposed to an actual, as you call it, a learning difference?
A lot of times it's something that's persistent over a really long time. And it is something that even with some instruction on how to write nicely, it doesn't instantly just fix. When the kid's like, oh, that's how you form that letter? Okay. Where they know what they're supposed to do, it just doesn't quite make it to the page. So it's usually a lot more consistent. But it is one of those things that it kind of is messy handwriting, kind of is the definition of dysgraphia in a lot of ways. So sometimes some kids can get very direct instruction, and that's really where you can tell the learning difference versus just bad handwriting. But you treat them both basically the same way, at least from like the initial stages of teaching them how do we properly form letters, how do we put proper spacing in a word. And I often see a lot more challenges with this since the pandemic because so many kids missed out on how do they write nicely in kindergarten and first grade because so many kids were at home doing their learning, and maybe their parents didn't know how to teach them how to hold a pencil properly and things like that they normally would have learned in their kindergarten and first grade classrooms, and they didn't learn how to do it. So I'm actually seeing a lot more cases of older kids right now, kids who are in fourth and fifth grade, and when they were younger during the times that kids were not at schools. And so we are seeing these challenges of diagnosticians really having a hard time telling whether some of these kids really have learning differences or it was just lack of education during those formative years when they normally would have learned those skills.
So it's not something that would just go away if the kid just write more.
Yes, it's one of those ones that's really where you can tell that learning difference is when it's persistent, because learning differences is just the way your brain works. It just works a little differently, which is totally fine. You just have to compensate in different ways. So some kids get really good at typing, and thankfully we live in a modern age where most things are not handwritten these days. And so a lot of times they have other ways that they can overcome it. So dysgraphia would be when it doesn't go away with just some, interventions.
So what are some signs that parents should look out for?
When you notice that their handwriting isn't getting better as they get older. A lot of times when a child is learning to write, it looks really messy and you just think of it as cute little kid writing when they, have giant letters and small letters and it just is all over the page and you're just really happy they know what their letters are and what shape they're supposed to be. And then it doesn't get any better. Normally, as kids get older, their handwriting gets smaller and smaller and smaller as they become well-versed and more fluent in their writing. And when you notice that they're not getting any better with time, that's when you should be concerned. Because normally the kindergartners will write 2 or 3 times bigger than a first grader. And then it gets smaller yet when they get into second grade. And then by third grade, that's usually more typical, line sizes that you would see after they hit, middle of third grade, maybe into fourth grade. Then you see they're more typical the way you and I would write these days with, our sizes of letters we would write with. And it's when you notice that they are not getting smaller and more neat with better spacing as that time is progressing.
So it's hard to tell when they're young. So you really would have to notice it when they're older.
Well, you can notice when they're younger if you have some comparison. As a parent, it's a little bit more challenging because if you don't have somebody else to compare it to. So a lot of times parents who have multiple children are better at catching things sooner because they're like, wait a minute, my other kiddo was able to do blah, 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 but this kid can't. And that's when it's a little easier. When it's the first child, that's more challenging because you don't know what's normal and what's not. But a lot of times teachers can flag it earlier because if you have a class full of kindergarten papers and you can see this one kid's letters are 10 times bigger than all the other kids in the class. And so when you can notice compared to other kids in their grade level, or like, let's say you're going to back to school night or that is open houses where you get to look at all the cute little kid projects on the walls, then you can see, oh, wait, this kid's handwriting looks so much different from all the other kids. So using those things when you have a frame of comparison, when you get to go visit the kids and you get to see all their great projects and you can notice, wait a minute, this doesn't look like the rest. And that is usually a better sign. Because as a parent, when you don't have as many ways to compare it to, it's a little bit more challenging than when you can see it side by side with other peers. Then you can really notice those challenges.
So yeah, so comparing it with other peers is one way to look for it. And also again, just if you see the same pattern. So like how old is too old to write
Uh, it,
developmentally appropriate?
It is never too late. It's one of those things that you can teach appropriate handwriting at any age. It does take a lot more motivation when they're older. So if you can catch kids when they're in first, second, third grade, it's a lot easier to make changes because they haven't developed so many of those motor patterns. Kind of like when you think about once you ride a bike, you always know how to ride a bike. It's that muscle memory. And so when kids get older, they unfortunately have a muscle memory of bad handwriting. And so sometimes that gets really challenging and the older kids have to be really motivated. So for example, I have a sixth grader, I guess now seventh grader. He's gotten older since I started working with him and he cannot hold a pencil properly. And it's really hard to teach him the right way. And last year he really wanted nothing to do with it. And then this year he's realizing his teachers are marking him wrong for things because they can't read his handwriting. And so now he's suddenly more motivated to listen to my direction when I show him the proper way to hold a pencil, the proper way to form letters and numbers. And then he's a little more willing to listen now because he has some motivation behind it. So it's not that it's ever too late, but the older kids really need to have some intrinsic motivation to really try and change their writing style because it just becomes a pattern. You're just used to writing a certain way, and that's just kind of your style. But if your style is unreadable, then you have to be a little bit extra motivated to consciously pay attention and try to build new habits. One thing that you can do sometimes if kids are having a really hard time and they aren't changing their habits is sometimes teach them something totally new. So I've had a lot of kids I've actually taught cursive because it's creating a brand new pattern. And a lot of times their cursive is massively better than their printing because you're starting from scratch with really good foundations and they don't have any of those old bad habits anymore. So sometimes teaching them something new, especially the older kids, they love to learn cursive. A lot of people think cursive is dead, but I know that a lot of kids actually love writing the fancy writing and being able to do cursive, they're actually really excited about. And so that's one way to try to teach some of those older kids because it's never too late to teach them. It's just one thing where you just have to be a little bit more creative and give them some motivation.
But then with cursive, you know, because it's all those loops, like, isn't it still like, you know, they're writing the loops really big or the letters are really big?
Yes, but it's one where you can teach them the good habits right away. So you can teach them how to use certain guides. So you might use 3-lined paper is a really great strategy for kids who have dysgraphia. So kind of like the paper that you see in kindergarten, first grade classrooms where it's got a top line, a bottom line, and the little dashes in the middle. Those ones are really great ways to teach kids with either printing or cursive how to do proper letter sizing. They really need something to compare it to know that, okay, this letter is a small letter and this one's a tall letter. or sometimes we'll say a tall, a small, and a fall. I think it might have come from Handwriting Without Tears. It's something I've used for so long that I don't even remember quite where it came from. And so you can teach them, these ones are small letters, these ones are tall letters, these are the ones that go under the line, and those are the ones we call the fall letters. And so those are the things that you can teach them explicitly. And so it does make it so it's still the same kind of challenges, but you're not thinking about the bad habits also on top of it. So you can start fresh and teach them the right way the first time, because it's a lot easier to learn something new than to unlearn something that you've learned the wrong way.
Mm. So now I'm wondering, because you were, talking before about, living in a modern world and kids are typing now. And I do notice that, in schools, there's a lot more computer learning and typing. Could that contribute to dysgraphia because kids are typing more, not really writing, with the hand formation? Could that contribute to dysgraphia?
I wouldn't say it contributes to dysgraphia because it's something that's already there. It's not like it needed anything added to it, but it could be something where it prevents kids from getting some of that direct instruction because they're writing on a digital device at such young ages. So, like when I was teaching at a school for kids with learning differences, I actually never let them use their computers for anything until the publishing draft, the very final one. So, we made them do everything on paper. And that's one of the things that kids are having to learn to go back to is writing more on paper, because I've seen so many schools go to only digital devices and they never have any papers ever. But then that really hurts them in some ways, because writing actually helps build connections in your brain and it helps make stronger memories for remembering what you wrote down compared to something you typed. And it's something that if we can keep bringing back some of those paper, pencil, old tasks, it actually helps them a lot. And then one of the things that I'm seeing these days is these kids who didn't really learn to write very neatly. Now, all of a sudden, thanks to the world of AI, I'm seeing a lot of schools tell kids they have to write everything by hand because they don't want Chat GPT and things like that to be writing their essays for them. And so they end up being like, wait, I don't know how to write all this stuff by hand. I just do it on the computer with autocorrect and automatic capitalization and things like that. So by doing a lot of things digitally, it does harm them in some of those developmental milestones or their ability to recall things that they've written down and things like that. And we really want to make sure that we bridge that gap between the wonderful world of technology, which really does save a lot of kids with learning differences. There's things that they would have really had a hard time getting by with without that assistive technology. But at the same time, we also have to balance it with some, handwritten stuff to keep building up those skills.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, and just and the importance of, motor memory and holding a pencil, and the fact that, I mean, even now as adults, everything is pretty much typed, but sometimes even just being able to sign your name on a contract, that does come into play. So now, I'm sure you said some things already, but what's the answer? What's the solution?
The
What can
big
we
one
do?
is really having some explicit handwriting instruction, is showing them how is the proper way to hold a pencil. So having kids where the pen is like pointing away from them compared to facing toward them in their hand, and being able to show them the proper way to grip a pencil, showing them how they can use a finger in between their letters in order to make proper spacing, and explicitly showing them how to write on a line. So a lot of times kids with dysgraphia start wherever on a page. They don't realize that we should start on the left and then go to the right, and they don't realize that there's tall letters and small letters and which one should sit where they should sit on the line. So they won't intuitively pick up. They're like, well, it's the same letter. It doesn't matter. So the G will be standing up on top of the line instead of falling down below it. And they don't realize that there's actually a proper location for those letters. It's not just about what shape it is, that there's a proper place where it should be. And they need that really explicit instruction because they won't just realize on their own. And then they often will write bottom up. And when they do that, it means they are starting on the line, so it's easier to place it on the line. And so but when you write bottom up, the writing tends to become a lot easier, especially when you're writing really quickly, compared to if you're writing your letters from the top down, then they end up getting a lot neater and it is harder to plan on where they're going to land. But if you can have some explicit instruction and practicing how do we write the letters nicely on a line, correcting it when they make a mistake and say, oh, that one's floating in the air like a balloon. We got to, bring it down to earth, and giving them just like fun little prompts, not nitpicking on them necessarily, but deciding a time and place. So having it being like a set amount of time when there's something where they're not generating ideas and trying to do perfect handwriting. So if you can explicitly bring the handwriting instructions separate from write a story and then use perfect letters. That's not usually how it works because their brain just has too much of a cognitive load. There's too many things happening in their brain at once, trying to create a really good story with good topics and good ideas and capitals and punctuation and nice handwriting. It's just too much. And so if you can show them a specific time to do proper handwriting practice and separate it from generating ideas and all these other things where you're the one picking what they write and they just copy it down with really neat letters, and just having a practice time where it's not also trying to ask them to do 10 other things on top of it.
So what you're recommending is improving writing technique, right? So
Yes.
things like the putting the finger between the words. It's kind of interesting hearing you explain it right from top to bottom, not bottom to top. What about the type of paper that they use? Because I think I remember like maybe like elementary, middle school, we used the wide ruled loose leaf paper, and then high school it went down to college ruled, which means it's the skinnier lines. So would that help?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a couple different ways. So I always start with the tri-line paper, meaning it's the one with the top, the bottom, and the dashy lines in the middle, even if they're fourth graders, just to teach them that there is a, proportion for the letters and the sizes that they are. And that's one really great way. There is another one that is a tactile one that you can get it through like OT websites and stuff like that. I don't remember the proper terminology for it, but it's bumpy. And so the lines are physically tactile. Like when a pencil hits it, they can feel it. And so it's a three-dimensional little bump on the lines. So the kids can feel where the lines should start and stop, which is also really nice. Those papers can be kind of expensive to do it. So one way that you can do it also is to do a highlighter. And so if you have a like 3-line paper, you can highlight just the bottom part and say, okay, all of these ones are small letters, don't go above the highlighter. And that's a cheap, easy way to be able to show them like, all right, anything like an H can go above the highlighter and anything like a G can go below the highlighter, but all the rest of them have to stay right in the middle of these highlighted parts. And so that way they can see to not go above that midline and to be able to separate what to do with it. And then just like you said, just like normal progression, you go from bigger to smaller. So once they can do that, then start doing smaller and smaller and smaller paper. And that way the kids can slowly start building up their skills. And it won't be instant, usually it takes a couple months. But if you start them from learning on the big lines paper, and then, like you said, go to college, wide ruled and then college ruled, and slowly build them up for it, then they can be ready.
So you mentioned OT, so, which is short for occupational therapy. So there are specialists that help with dysgraphia.
Absolutely. Yes, there's specialists who work on that. So occupational therapy is one of them. And then every once in a while, you can find some handwriting instructors. So like on just last week's episode of my podcast, maybe the week before, I had a tutor who works explicitly on handwriting. And that's actually what she does, is she teaches kids how to write properly. And so there's different experts that you can find that can teach handwriting specifically just to help kids overcome those challenges.
Oh, okay. So is it like, are there certain assisting technologies that might help with that? Like I know, we talked about it before with your episode on dyslexia. I know that there's like special like reading glasses, I think that's out there. So are there assisting technologies that also help with dysgraphia?
Well, thankfully, in the world of technology today, everybody has these in their pocket. So, like speech to text, being able to do some voice typing or to teach the kids explicitly how to type. Because if it's more about the letter formation, sometimes they can be taught how to do typing programs. There's a silly British one called dance mat typing that I love for kids, and it doesn't emphasize anything to do with speed. And that's actually my biggest pet peeve for typing programs. It's all about getting faster. And you know what happens when you make kids go faster? they get worse. They are trying to beat their score and be like, look, I'm faster. I was like, but you did picky pokey typing with one finger. That doesn't count as typing. And so I like doing silly little programs that don't actually have anything to do with how fast they're doing it. I want them doing things accurately and building good muscle memory for the correct way to do them. And so being able just to do the stuff that's built into most Chromebooks and computers and phones these days is just doing those voice typing or learning how to type. And a lot of times that can be really helpful. I have a friend who actually in high school, he was struggling and practically failing his classes, even though he was one of the smartest ones of us. And it wasn't until his senior year of high school that he found out he had dysgraphia, because in my generation, it was not really something that was looked for or diagnosed or anything. And so it wasn't until we got older and we started typing things and he finally started doing better in school that he learned that if he types stuff, he does a lot better. And instantly his grades started going up at the end of high school. And so it's things where we're just slowly building up that knowledge for more people to understand how to use it and thankfully live in the world of technology that we can make lives easier for ourselves.
Right. It takes away the pressure of, we also want to balance, right? We don't want to but I guess it depends on your age as well. Like there's a lot of, technology that's out there, simply typing up your papers. But then, I find it becomes an issue when they're like 3 years old, 4 years old and typing, but
Yes.
um,
They should be playing Legos, doing things with beads, things that build up. And that's another really great help for kids with dysgraphia is actually fine motor games, like things that make them use their little pinchy fingers. And so things like picking up things with tweezers or being able to build things with Play-Doh and putty and doing little tiny Legos, not the bigger block kind of Legos, and being able to string beads or those ones where I don't remember what they're called. They're the little circles and you put it on the little pokey things and then you melt it and it turns into like a heart or whatever it is. And they're these little melty beads things and they can make little designs, but they're really hard to not knock them all over. And so things like that that build up their fine motor skills are great. And we want kids doing that kind of stuff because kids who are 3 and 4 years old should not be focusing on handwriting. They should be focusing on building up their muscles that they need to do handwriting. So we want the kids using their muscles in other ways that will help them in academically later because 3-year-olds don't need to be typing things.
I read somewhere another strategy is like playing with Play-Doh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it uses all the muscles in your hands. You don't think about just how many muscles and nerves and tendons and things are in your hands. And when they're little, they're still developing. Like if you Google the x-rays of a 4-year-old compared to a 7-year-old, the bones look completely different because they're still growing and there's these gaps in between their bones and things like that as they're all growing together. And so they're not physically able to do the same things. And so if you do things like Play-Doh and clay and things that require you to build up the muscles in your hands and things that require you to grasp onto things the same way that you would grasp a pencil, then it makes it a lot easier when it is time for them to do their handwriting.
There you go. So parents, when their kids are young, maybe like 7 and under, have them play with Play-Doh. So playing with Play-Doh, Legos, anything that involves the use of their hands and
stringing beads, learning how to tie their shoes, like all those things build up the same muscles. Like think about how you hold onto a shoelace when you're a little kid. It's the same finger motion of pinching things with your fingers, and learning how to do things like that.
Of course. So now, is there a pill for dysgraphia? Like, is there any medical interventions?
No, it's all just explicit instruction and working with an educator, such as an OT or a handwriting instructor, to really learn how to properly hold a pencil, learn how to write on the line, that kind of thing. And it's just something that, it doesn't require any medication or anything like that. And it's just, learning differently and learning how to. You want kids to know how to handwrite and how to be able to do things by hand. And then you also want to teach them when is a good time just to use assistive technology. So it came up for me with a student that I had last week, and she was making a bunch of mistakes, but I had to remind her, I was like, you're sick right now. We were on Zoom, by the way. We were not spreading germs. And I was like, you're making a lot of mistakes today, but this is something you need to know, that your dyslexia and your dysgraphia are going to be more challenging for you when you don't feel well. Your brain's going to be a little overwhelmed with trying to, fight the germs in your system, that it can't also focus on something else. So when kids are overtired, or they have, 3 hours worth of homework, or if they're not feeling great, those are all great times to use assistive technology and to not write by hand and not do things, the more traditional way. That's when they're probably going to need more assistive technology, and being able to utilize some help is when they can't quite handle doing it the regular way, because it would just take them too long or have too many mistakes, and just knowing the right time to utilize those extra resources.
Absolutely, absolutely. So compared to someone who doesn't have these learning differences, it takes them longer to learn something and to gain new information.
Yes, and even just to get it done. So even once they do know how to write nicely, it might always be a slower process. So they might have nice handwriting, but it might take them twice as long to write. And so knowing that it can happen, and that you get great interventions and you do know how to write nicely, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be super speedy right away. It might always take a little bit longer because it takes a little bit more mental effort, but that's okay. And everybody has different strengths. And, thankfully, we don't always have to handwrite all the time. And it's things that you just have to know that for every weakness, there's also a strength. And so remembering that while this might be one thing that's challenging for you, there's always going to be something else that isn't so challenging. There's probably something you're really great at to balance out.
So now what happens when, this, we don't, I mean, to a lack of a better phrase, that we leave it untreated, right? So, okay, they have poor handwriting, whatever, right? We could ignore that, right? So what happens when if we leave it alone and we don't do anything to improve? What would happen?
This is where there are social consequences, is what I like to call them, which is that unfortunately we don't live in a fair world, is that you are judged by your ability to write and spell. So if you aren't explicitly taught how to write nicely and how to spell properly, people will judge you for it and think you're dumber for it. And it's not nice and it's not fair, but it's actually how the world works. Imagine if you got, a resume on your desk and everything's spelled wrong compared to this other one where everything's spelled properly. Everything else was the same, you would probably pick the one that looks nicer. And if you had to pick between somebody who wrote a note on your desk that you can't read and somebody who gave you a nice clearly written message of what you need to get done, you'd probably ignore the messy one and do the other one first. And so, and thinking about, if you are a kid, guess how you talk to friends? Through texting. And if you can't properly, type or, write the little messages to your friends, then you kind of get left out of some of their games. Like even the games, they have this little chat component on there. So if you aren't good at spelling, or the kids can't read what you're spelling, or you are embarrassed if you're spelling, then you're probably not going to message those people as much, or you're not going to play that game. And so we have to think about the fact that it's tied into a lot of things that we do. And think about how many times somebody posts on social media, like, dude, you can't even use the right version of there. And think about if you posted something and everything is spelled wrong. And think about what might happen with, kids teasing them, like, look how dumb he is, you can't even write. And it's not nice, but it's the world we live in. And middle schoolers are mean and we love them, but they're learning social skills and they haven't developed them yet. And they're kind of mean. And so learning that there are social consequences to not helping kids who need it. And we really want to set them up for success in the world. And we want to teach them it's wrong to be unkind to people. And we want them to know that there are learning differences. And that might be why a kid is challenged. But in the moment of, little middle schoolers being mean to each other, they're not thinking about that. And so we want to give them as much of a head start as we can by helping them as early as we can. Obviously, not before they're like 5 or 6 years old. We want to make sure that if it's a handwriting issue, of course, there's other learning differences you can help sooner. But when they're younger, focus on, building social skills, building kindness and things like that. But as they get older, if you can spot something, it is much easier to treat a child in first or second grade with a learning difference than it is by the time they're in fourth, fifth, sixth grade, because they aren't just, a couple months behind, then they're years behind. And so if you're 2 years behind, sometimes it takes 3 years to catch you up. Compared to if you're 6 months behind in first or second grade, then that's really easy to catch you back up. And thinking about the longer you wait, the longer it takes to correct the problem. And then there's also the social impact of They're the kid who feels really bad about themselves. They're the one who hates writing. They're the one that refuses to pick up a pencil. And they're the ones who are trying to avoid writing at all cost. And then you have to overcome the social and emotional problem on top of the learning difference problem. So then you have two problems to correct at once instead of just one. And that's where we have to try to help kids, is if we can help them help sooner, then you're correcting just the learning difference and not the social emotional impact on top of the learning difference. Because those emotional parts, those ones are usually the biggest battle to fight, is to help the kid know that you are smart, you are amazing. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, but we can help you with this, but we got to overcome this. We can't, have a battle every time I'm trying to teach you. And it makes it a lot harder to try to win them over as they get older, versus when they're little, they're like, oh, look, I'm so smart, I can do it now. And it's really cute to see the reactions. When they're bigger and they're in tears and they're fighting you, it's not as cute. And it's really heartbreaking to watch. And so if we can get them that help sooner, then it really does make a huge difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. You spoke gems there, and even, in kids that I tutor, and especially if they're middle school age, high school age, and then you see that, whoa, they're actually on a level that's like 2 or 3 grades below, or even like they're lacking the foundational skills and they're older. It's more work that they have to do, and more work having to catch them up, and they feel it, and they feel that social impact. It's in everything that they do, right? And texting and talking to friends and writing notes. So when you can't do certain things, it affects their social life. And then
Yeah.
that's how it goes into depression and all these anxiety and all these other mental health issues that, kids experience. So what you're saying is true. All right. So I just want to reiterate this point again. So what's the difference between, dysgraphia and actual neurological phenomenon and just poor handwriting? So I just want to, I want you to reiterate that point again.
Of course. So dysgraphia is usually something you can see starting at a really young age, that they've always had a hard time holding the pencil the right way. They've always had a hard time writing the letters, especially ones where it crosses the line. So like an X, and things like that, where they have to cross the midline. A lot of times that is a lot more challenging for kids. You can notice it when they're younger, at a really early age, that their writing in kindergarten is a lot bigger than all the other kids in the class. They can fit like 6 letters on the page, and the other kids can fit like 20 letters. And you can see the difference. And especially as they get older, where you can see that it is continuing to be a challenge. It's an ongoing problem. And even once they've had some instruction on how do we write our letters, once they finish kindergarten, they learn all the letters, and they're finishing first grade, and they should be learning how to read and spell. And yet their writing still looks like a kindergartner writing in first grade, when normally you can start seeing it all come together, and it isn't getting any better. And dysgraphia is really when it's lasting long term. It's not something that is just a lack of instruction. It is something that they've had the instruction, and yet it still looks like a kindergartner did it when they're in, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade. And you know that they're older and it doesn't match their cognitive level. That's the other really big thing, is that you can tell when you talk to this kid, they sound so smart. And then the second they write something on paper, you're like, whoa, what happened, kid? I can't even tell what you're writing. And to be able to see that difference. I just had a kiddo last week that she is an 8th grader, and she wrote the word suspicious on a piece of paper, and I could hardly read it. And I was like, oh, but if you paid attention to what the rest of the story was, she was talking with a really great vocabulary, just with horrible spelling and handwriting. And yet she had these really great ideas and great vocabulary that didn't align with what her writing did. So seeing that misalignment is a really great way to see the difference in a learning difference, is to know where it doesn't quite match.
So just having the kids write more, would that improve? Like just write more lines, just write more essays by hand. Like, is that a
No,
good
because
tip?
that's the thing, is they need explicit instruction. They need somebody to show them, how do you write? They need someone to remind them when it goes the wrong way. They need someone to notice when it's sitting on the wrong place on the line and explicitly teach them. these letters you need to write from the top down. This letter is supposed to go below the line. This letter is supposed to be half as big as the one next to it. And they need that explicit instruction. And that's really where the difference is just doing something more. That's kind of like telling a bad reader to go read silently. That doesn't teach them how to read. That just gives them more time doing the thing that they hate and they're not good at. And it just builds up this resentment toward that activity you're making them do. And so what you want to do is give them that explicit instruction as to how do you do it? What does it look like? What does a good writer do? What should it do? How am I supposed to fix this? And giving them that non-example of how theirs looks and then the positive example of how it should look. And being able to see those side by side. I'm like, do you see the difference between yours and mine? Or like, look how you wrote it. You went like this and I went like this. And showing them like that difference in direction. And I had one kid the other day, he wrote a story last month. And then I made him write another story this month. And I said, today your rule is every letter has to be written from the top down. And instantly his story was much more legible. That's the only instruction I gave him. It was just to write from the top down because it made him slow down and be more thoughtful about his letters. And instantly you could read so many more of his words than you could just last month without any other instruction. And while he does need more instruction, don't get me wrong, I was trying to prove a point to him to see how one tiny change can make a world of difference.
So doing more of something doesn't actually make things better. It just makes things worse. So you actually want to show them how to do it and actually break down the skill.
Yes.
There you go. All right. So we're going to start to wind things down. So, as we did last time, I like to ask my guests to share any words of wisdom with our audience. So, Lisa, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to share?
I would say that having dysgraphia doesn't always have to be a challenge. There is a way that you can overcome it. You can learn how to write great and how to have really nice handwriting. Sometimes it takes a little extra motivation, or you can make it fun by learning how to do cursive and things like that. But just know it is never too late if you want to learn. And to know that a learning difference doesn't define you. This might be one thing that's tough for you, but there's always going to be something that's tough for you. Everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses. So I always joke with the kids that there's a reason I'm a reading and writing teacher and not a music or art teacher. And how if you tried to get me to teach you how to sing a song, I would fail miserably, even though I'm a really great teacher. And we just have to know where our strengths are. And you can pick a career and a function in your life and something that makes you happy using your strengths. There's always something that you can do that balances out something that you can't. So just be really proud of your accomplishments and find those things that you're really amazing at, and know the things that you're less amazing at, you can get better. You just need to get the right kind of help.
Beautiful. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for explaining dysgraphia to us. Oh, sorry. I have one more question. Is it a left-handed, right-handed thing?
Ooh, that is a fabulous question.
Yeah.
That is a goodie. I have actually seen that kids who are left-handed have, I'm going to reverse that. Kids with learning differences have a higher incidence of being left-handed. Because just because you're left-handed doesn't mean you have to have a learning difference. So, for example, when I had a regular general education classroom of 25 kids, I might have 2 left-handed kids. When I had a classroom full of kids with learning differences, almost half of them were left-handed. And so it is actually a higher incidence of left-handedness in kids with learning differences. So great question. And sometimes there's also the problem that right-handed people try to make left-handed kids right-handed ways. So for example, the way you cross your T is reverse if you are left-handed compared to if you're right-handed. And so part of the problem is I've actually seen kids who are forced to write in a right-handed way when they should be using left-handed strategies. And so that is actually a really fabulous question. Thanks for asking.
Wait, so forced how? Like, how do you know that it's forced?
Because I've actually had a few kids who say, my teacher says I have to do it this way. And it was an old school traditional teacher that made him do things the way right-handers would do it. And so it was really unfortunate because a lot of times teachers don't know the opposite. So, for example, this kiddo was learning cursive, and the teacher made him do it the way a right-handed person would write cursive, and it doesn't really work very well if you're left-handed. And so, like, I've actually learned how to write with both hands. Not that I'm very good with my left hand, but I've learned how to do it so that I can show the kids the right way to hold the pencil with their left hand going the right direction, and being able to show them that way. So sometimes it's ignorance of they don't know the other way that a left-handed person would do it. And it also depends on how old they are. A long time ago, they actually used to force kids to become right-handed. It's really unfortunate, but there are still a few teachers out there. That is very, very uncommon these days, thankfully. But I know many people who are of my generation and older that were actually forced to become right-handed when they were left-handed.
Mm. So definitely more, I guess, more exposure to left-handedness.
Yeah, exactly. And like what things would be challenging for someone who's left-handed? There's like an entire left-handed store out here on the West Coast that has like left-handed scissors and left-handed notebooks and whatever. So you can find all sorts of little lefty things too. Or one of the handwriting curriculums I have actually has a left-handed workbook. So sometimes you can find curriculum that has a right and left-handed workbook for things like handwriting.
All right. There you go. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So, Lisa, thank you again for coming back on Hot Topic. So now let's get to all your promo. All right, you guys. So, Lisa, you can find her all over the place. You could her website is www.parnelloeducation.com. She has a Facebook page, which is just Parnello Education. She has a Facebook group. Make sure you join that group. She is also on Instagram as Parnello Education as well. So her Facebook page and her Instagram are the same account name, Parnello Education. And she has two LinkedIn, you guys. So she has a personal LinkedIn and a business LinkedIn. So make sure you follow her on all of her social media accounts. So follow her on both LinkedIns, the Facebook page, join her Facebook group, as well as the Instagram as well. And if you want to learn more about Lisa's services, go to her website. It is her last name's in the domain. ParnelloEducation.com. Do you want to talk about your businesses, your services, what you
Sure.
offer?
Absolutely. So I do one-on-one dyslexia therapy with kids, and then I also train parents and educators about learning differences. And so I even have a free bonus for your audience today at parnelloeducation.com/masterclass. You can attend a free masterclass all about dyslexia and the 3 keys to success with dyslexia. And I just love helping parents and educators learn how to help kids with learning differences be successful. So I have my Educator's Guide to Dyslexia course and the Parents Discovering Dyslexia course, so that parents and educators all know how to help kids. And that way I can, provide coaching services to parents and educators just so I can help them get started on their journey through learning differences, because so much of what we are having trouble with is just lack of exposure and knowledge and not knowing what to do. So that's what I love to do, is helping parents and educators know what to do to help when they see kids struggling, because no kid should have to struggle, and we want to provide as much help and support as we can. And then every week I have my own podcast, Dyslexia Devoted, that is usually little bite-sized bits, usually 15 minutes or less. And on Dyslexia Devoted, every week I talk about a different thing with learning differences. So there are some episodes about dysgraphia to go along with what we've learned today. And so if you can pick and choose about different topics about learning differences, and Dyslexia Devoted has a new episode every week, and I'm pretty proud. We're up to 80 episodes now. So there's a nice little bank of things for everyone to choose from when they want to learn something new.
Beautiful, beautiful. And did you talk about your course for parents?
Yes. So the Discovering Dyslexia course. Yes. So in that course, it's where parents can learn how to read those diagnosis reports when they get a report about a kid with learning differences. They can learn how to find advocates. They can learn what is the right kind of instruction for a kid with dyslexia. And they can learn how to set appropriate goals so that the kids can be successful. And I even have a module on assistive technology, so you can learn how to use assistive technology to help kids be more successful and work smarter and not harder.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. Do you do, so is it just kids with dyslexia that you work with, or you do dysgraphia as well?
Dysgraphia as well, and especially because a lot of times they go hand in hand. So it is pretty common for a kid to have dyslexia and dysgraphia. They don't always go together, but it is quite frequent. And so I actually help kids with both. And so when I picked my niche, dyslexia is kind of our main hub, but I help kids with all sorts of different learning differences. So dyslexia and dysgraphia are absolutely the top two for the things that I help kids with when they're having challenges, and then helping parents as well when they're trying to go through the IEP process to know what kind of things to ask for and stuff like that. I do coaching sessions with parents so that they know the right questions to ask for themselves when they're, going into IEPs, or knowing what to ask for, or saying like, hey, they're using this instruction at school. Is that really going to help my kid? And so I do coaching sessions with parents too, just to help them navigate the process. But yeah, dyslexia and dysgraphia are definitely my big top two learning differences I work with.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. All right, you heard it, you guys. So let me just put that back up there. Yeah, so you heard it, you guys. So dysgraphia, dyslexia, it's like the dyslexia is the reading one,
Mm-hmm.
dysgraphia is the writing one.
Yes. Yes.
um, so yeah, so she can work with your child in any of those things. Is it just are you virtual? Are you in person?
I have an in-person office in Palo Alto, California, and then I also do Zoom sessions with kids who are remote as well. So I have kids all the way in New York and Massachusetts, because the wonders of time zones when they're after school is when kids out here on the West Coast are in school. So I end up working with some kids all across the country, actually. So I've got kids in 4 different states. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 4 different states now.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right.
Yeah.
So she does virtual sessions. So wherever you are in the country, she can help your child out. And of course, if you just so happen to be in Palo Alto, California, she has an office that you can go to as well. So make sure you check her out. The information is at the bottom of the screen for my video people. But if you're listening to this on a podcast, the information is in the description. So however you are taking in this episode, the information is at your fingertips, you guys. All right, so Lisa, thank you again for coming back on Hot Topics.
Thank you for hosting such a wonderful podcast. I love how much information you are sharing with the world, and I know it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I try my best. All right, I'll put you backstage now. All right, you guys. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of Hot Topics. Let me get my information up here. All right, so I am going to take this moment to remind you that Hot Topics is a production of my tutoring company, A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So have, if you or your child is struggling in any way academically, maybe they're falling behind a few grade levels, or maybe they're not turning in their homework, or maybe they're just lazy, whatever it is, and they just need someone else to motivate them because you keep complaining and they're not listening to you, and you just need a neutral party, hit us up, you guys. So hit us up. Our website is www.astepaheadtutoringservices.com. You can also find us across multiple social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook, formerly known as Twitter, which is X now, Instagram, YouTube. So you can find us on multiple social media platforms. So just type in our name, A Step Ahead Tutoring Services, and we'll pop up. Make sure you look for the pencil with the gray and black tip. Or maybe you see our old logo. It's the book with the ribbon in it. But either way, A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. Make sure you check us out on social media, and make sure you follow us there as well. So once again, I'm just going to give you the website, astepaheadtutoringservices.com. So if you are seeking any kind of tutoring services, we do one-on-one, we do test prep, college counseling, editing and proofreading. We do virtual sessions for anyone in the country. We also do some in-person sessions as well if you happen to be in the New York City area. So either way, we are available to you one way or another. So make sure you check us out. And I also want to encourage you, to leave your feedback about this episode today. If you're watching this on video or you're listening to this on a podcast, give us a rating. Let us know your feedback. You could type it in below right now, or you could drop a star or whatever. However, you give us your feedback. Please give us your feedback about this episode today. Did you not like it? Did you like it? Whatever it is. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let us know. Put that information in the chat box below or in the chat thread. If you're watching this on video, if it's a podcast, I think you can still leave a comment or, give us a 5-star rating, hopefully. So give us a rating. So either way, I'm asking, please take the moment right now to give us your feedback and rate this episode. So please take a moment to give us your feedback. All right, you guys, and that is it for yet another episode of Hot Topics. Thank you again for joining me, and I hope that you join me on the next episode. Thank you, guys, and now I am signing off. Bye, guys.